Good morning, everyone. Thanks for getting here so bright and early. I know 8 o'clock is a bit of an early start for some, but I'm glad everyone could come, either in person or on Zoom. So for those who don't know me, I've taken over Steve's job. He was the Sector and Community Development Officer before me, but now I've taken over. Happy. So today for Men's Health Week, we just wanted to celebrate positive mental health, positive parenting as well. So Men's Health Week was launched in 2002 and has become an annual international week of recognition and awareness, building for male health issues on a global scale. And the initiative has grown to encourage international collaboration in developing health policies and services around the world that are interested in men's health, boys and their families, so we can support them. And today we have 2 guest speakers, one of them being the Crocman, Andy, and then also coming in via Zoom is Liam. He's coming in later. But just to introduce Andy, he holds a very personal connection to the issue of mental health and is passionate about starting the conversation for men to become more mainstream in everyday life, talking about mental health. So with a lot of lived experience and experience in supporting his son through his own mental health battle, Andy is now a mental health support worker with a wealth of knowledge and experience. So I just want to let Andy take over.
Thank you very much. So I'll even put the hood up, but I'm going to take it off. It's a bit warm today, so yeah. Normally here I am. This is me, this is Crocman. So,
do you want me to get your
yeah. So, see, that's the problem. What we beat on. There is a relevance to the crocodile. I don't make light of mental health or any way really to put it. This means a very big significance between here and my story later on today of where the croc comes into the story. But I just want you guys to see it as a glimmer of hope, of resilience, and seeing where you are and where you're at. That inside you is the real you. Inside the suit is the real me. The crocodile came out a certain situation when I was at my lowest, but it's a great way. So I don't know on the top, that's good. So we've got a problem today with the fit, so I'm just going to hover around the PC. So myself, having career change 30 years in IT, I now work with big experience here mentally, utilising my lessons learned in anxiety, depression, alcohol use, and anxiety. I'm not going to read every slide, by the way, today it's going to be very short, there's very few words. Realistically, what I do is I apply my own recovery techniques, rationale and understanding of the situation to help my clients with their own recovery plans, helping them achieve their life goals. I think you've already heard I'm very passionate for mental health generally, participate in public events as a keynote speaker. I'm a government advisor on a lot of the new forward thinking about lived experience, peer mentoring, into how that gets into the mainstream and the understanding of that. One of the biggest projects I'm involved in at the moment is Project Echo, which is Western Australian Allied Mental Health. I've been brought in as a lived experience consumer to try and tell the doctors how it is from the outside of the coin. That's really working well, and I hope to push that forward so that we can now start seeing where there's a lot more community-based support for people around rather than just the clinical is and drugs. They can work hand in hand very closely together. So that comes into where I run a support bar and a mental working group. That's a bit of an appraisal of me. I'm going to jump over and try not to trip over. So really my story today is going to be a bit of a snapshot of how I got to my situation. I'm not going to have you in tears and worry and woe is me and we can see the tape already. Snapshot of where I am, but a lot of it's the positiveness on how you can rebuild things and get yourself back on. So, you said a dinosaur, I've been called alligators, dinosaurs, but it's actually crocodile. So I'm Crocman. Crocodile tears. So my journey with clinical depression and alcohol use. That picture shows it all. I've been there a few times, I can promise you.
Just going to people on Zoom and just ask you to speak up a bit.
Sorry guys, yes. Sorry guys. I'll try and look up and speak as well. I don't mumble, but I do go pretty quickly, so sorry. So is that a bit better? Better? Yeah.
Surely.
Cool. So we're going to touch on the very, very nice subject of alcohol in the first instance. It's been a very big part of my life. So this slide encapsulates my childhood, I'm afraid to say. Starts off in the top there, sherry, Advocaat, Snowball, and martini. So being brought up in the UK, very big drink culture. Christmas always used to be the fun thing to sneak a sherry with your granny, or you'd have a Snowball, and then we'd sit in the corner. So the early 80s and the memories of alcohol was, yeah, I remember having a few martinis, sitting there doing the Scottish Duke and passing out in the chair. That's the mentality that we had and the family had about alcohol around families. It was intrinsic. There was a beer culture. Time goes on, it transpires that unfortunately mum and dad used to partake in drinking sessions, and invariably a nice meaningful discussion would carry on in the background. So there was a lot of verbal violence, a lot of physical violence all around alcohol bits and pieces. That culminated in mum and dad deciding that they really didn't like each other when I was 8 years of age. Quite traumatic at the time, obviously. The downside, and divorce now is quite a common thing, but in those days it was unheard of. This was back in, I told you already, I'm only 21 years old, so a few years ago, when divorce wasn't there. So the understanding of what's going on. So you have two sides of a coin, you have mum, you have dad. Unfortunately, I was too young to realise the wrongdoings on father's part, so I gravitated towards dad. That caused a lot of problems in the household, so I was forever just put that part there. So the solution to anything in the household was a good bollocking, pardon the French, and a good slap around the ear. So that's where violence comes in. So realistically, you then carry on going through the teenage years, and then that's not me, funny enough, I'm not cracked up there. Started regularly drinking probably by an age of about 13 or 14. UK, the legal drinking age was actually 18, so try and work out how we've done that, but that's another story. Carries on, progresses through alcohol, and yeah, this is probably a good Friday, Saturday night. They're all just stood there jarring as quick as you can, as much as you can. Doing this talk is a stunning realisation of how much importance there was on alcohol in my life. Now, I want to just say that's now behind me. So now, lovely quote there. You guys may not be able to see that on Zoom land. I don't know. My mum always said you've got to put the past behind you before you can move on. So now this is where we're going into the really positive, interesting stuff. Fast forward, that was me when I was age 12. My lovely wife there. We have two beautiful children. Growing up, this forum today is about positive parenting. So what you then have to do is change your views and perspectives on parenting. Learn how to be a parent, maybe. I watch what I say here because there was never any love missing. There was love in the family. I'm not saying that the parents have done a bad job, but you learn how to be a parent by not being a parent sometimes. So what I'd like to introduce here is Andy's magic book of parenting. There it is. It's better than a blank one. There is no magic book. I think all you can do as a parent is be supportive, understanding, a human being, but given the background of my history, you've got to take time where you can actually, instead of reacting to a situation, take a deep breath to go, okay, cool. What's the effect on the child? What's the effect? What could this do longer term? So yeah, I did put that there, and I was thinking that you can read the books and everything else like that. There's really no book about parenting, I'm afraid to say. We could try, but I've probably got some academics on the line. I'll probably get in trouble for that, but that's good. So this one's saying here as well. So generational trauma. I think that's realistically what I can somewhat have happened with me. So years and years and years of people telling you you're not good enough, you're stupid. Here in Australia, it's the same as the UK. It's called banter, allegedly, but a lot of it's meaning and hurtful and bits and pieces. Some of the quotes they taking the mickey sort of thing. So maybe where we need to get to is this point of view, where we actually say we're open and honest, we love each other, we're proud of you, encourage, support, bits and pieces. Now moving on to where the crop's going to be coming into the place. So, my children had a great life. They're having a great life, sorry. They've got a great life. We've travelled lots, we've done a lot as a family. We actively take time to have meals together, we talk, bits and pieces like this. So this is now going on to the actual supporting into a mental health situation. My son in year 12 started suffering with clinical depression. At the time, I thought he was just growing up. I thought he was just being a teenager. Again, this comes back to the magic book. It doesn't say on page 57 of the book of parenting, if your son's sad and doesn't get out of bed, that means he's got depression. It wasn't there. So you question what you do and how you understand it. We're so lucky nowadays, there's so much awareness, situations like this, the internet, and mental health is so prevalent that people are now realising the science. When I was younger, it was a case of my biorhythms, a miserable sod, just get over it, carry on, whatever, bits and pieces like that. So we went through the situation with my son where it was a fine line here where this point was, which was where we were at. We didn't know that it was addiction. We didn't know whether it was just him being a moody teenager. He went from really well doing an ATAR, so then you suddenly start looking at, is it the school pressures that are causing the problems? He was also an athlete playing lacrosse for Australia. Was that too much, or was he suffering from sportsman's depression, where you get your serotonin and all your chemicals going around your body in bits and pieces? So really what ended up happening there was I just took a step back and then decided to see how I could help and support him. One thing I might later on, if everyone's happy to, is I would like to, whilst I talk about mental health, I see it from a depression point of view. One very good video which puts depression and the understanding of someone who's having depression is the Black Dog. I had a Black Dog, the Black Dog organisation. I might put that on later if that's okay. I was going to put that into the speech, but again, it just highlights the feelings and where you're at. I saw that in the early stages of this for my son, and it really resonated to understand where he was at. So then started working out how I could help my son. I think, again, as a speaker, you probably realise I am quite vocal, quite understanding, but we need to learn to talk and listen at the same time. So historically, since man has been caveman, hit over the head, don't talk about anything, stiff upper lip and all those things. Hey, how about we start opening up, being honest and open with our children? Open the avenues about how to have a discussion. I mentioned earlier that the family life I have now is we actually sit around the table, we watch the news together. At the moment, the news is possibly doom and gloom. I'm not saying let's do exposure therapy to kids by showing them the news, but the good thing about watching the news is it prompts a conversation, good and bad. So if there's something going on, you can actually turn and say, so the guys get to experience their feelings and understanding at a very early age. There was some news the other day, is actually, I have to watch this because I'm from the UK. There used to be a thing called News Round at 5 o'clock in the evening, but it was a children's version of the news. So you'd have the good stuff and the interesting stuff. Just seems to be now that a lot of the television and children's television is around your Blueies, which has got some subliminal education or just general cartoons and bits and pieces. I'm not going to go into it, but let's get back to it. So yeah, so let's just open the avenues for discussion, be honest and open. I've been honest and open with my children about my journey, where I've come from, my recovery and resilience building stuff. So deal with compassion, understanding, right, so I'm non-judgmental. It's not come out as good as I hope. It's, yeah. If they tell you something, don't go into the automatic response that we would always say, you can't do you. This is where empathy comes in. Understand, try and understand where they're going. Try and get in their own head to see where they're going and how they're going. One big thing here, which I really need to say through anything, this is supporting from the parental role model side of things into everything, and as a support worker, suggest, don't tell people what they need to do. The last thing you want to be told is what to do. Because historically, as a kid, you'll always dig your heels in the ground and say, no, not having that. So suggest it, plant the seed. Suggest it a couple of times, positive reinforcement, plant, starts growing, and then you understand it's there. So now we're really getting into crocodile land here, leading up to the crocodile guys. So this is my boy. I told you about his lacrosse. Without being too boastful and big, he's done very well. But he was suffering with depression throughout this whole series here. But lacrosse was what kept him going. So the far right-hand one there, he was actually voted the MVP in the under-18 Australian Championships. It's good for his confidence, good for him, kept him going. That then led on to selection into the World Championships and the under-19 World Championships in Canada. Bank of Dad is very depleting, guys. Begging bold, you know, it's $14,000 for your son to pay for the country, but again, for his building his self-esteem again in there, that was awesome. And this one here was when he represented Australia. So the crocodile comes into the situation. I look up and we're talking about us being role models to our children. I've got nothing but admiration and total wowness about my son. So he's been a role model to me as much as I've been a role model to him. So going into the World Championships, he was pretty funky. I'd been doing a lot of work with him and I suddenly started to see the signs that I was pretty much in the same way myself. But I was a 21-year-old gentleman, okay, middle-aged, going to a situation where there's still the male bravado, the male psyche that you've got to be strong and you've got to be there for these guys. So at that point, I sort of knew there was something going on, but I was never going to admit it. So what I ended up doing was self-medicating. The alcohol came in again. My life started revolving around alcohol. Wasn't full-blown functioning alcoholic, needed to drink all the time, but I could drink a lot and I'd go 1, 2, 3, oblivion. Life would revolve around going out for a meal somewhere. Oh, let's go to the pub. Day off work, let's go to the pub. I used to work shift work, so I'd work 2 days, 2 nights, so there's a lot of binge drinking involved in that as well. But that then started greatly into the depression and bits and pieces. So what you'll really want to know is, this is where Crocman comes in. So, I was the team mascot for my son's under-19 Australian team. I decided that if this guy had gone through 4 years of what he'd gone through, and also still performing at the elite level, his first game was there playing the United States of America, best lacrosse team in the world. So I went, the least I can do is don a croc suit and stand there going, Aussie, 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 oi, 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 and getting everybody going. Well, this snowballed. I became a bit of a local celebrity, I'm afraid to say. Don't know why. But really, the croc suit, as I said earlier on, is there. This is when I was also at my lowest. But because of the inspiration from my son, the dedication, me just wanting to do something, put the croc suit on and I could be the real me, the fun, the bubbly, the me you see now. So use that just as a pointer. So when I bring it into the talk for the mental health thing, it's just so that you guys can go away and remember, and almost as a light bulb moment, just remember that no matter what you're going through, you're still in there. You're still there. This is me. This is me. So then what happened was we'd come back from all these traveling around with lacrosse and bits and pieces, and I had to go back to a horrible word. I'll refer to it as the W word, if that's okay, because I don't swear too much in the public arena. Yeah, the thing that pays the bills. So then I started, this is a modern slide again, we're talking 4 or 5 years ago where stress, burnout, and bits and pieces were there or thereabouts, but there was a lot of external pressures. And I suddenly started seeing that I was having these fun and games, exhaustion, isolation. This is a big one, which is going to become very prominent very soon. Escape fantasies, irritability, even I can't even say it, and frequent illness. Luckily enough, the illness wasn't too bad because with my situation, because of shift work, I had 4 days off. So what was happening was I was stumbling through the day shift, stumbling through the night shift, sleeping for 4 days in floods of tears in bed, not getting out of bed, good break and going back to work again. Isn't life, you know? So it was never evident in the workplace and or my situation where it was actually going on. So this is a lovely slide I've taken from said Black Dog Institute. Eventually, I became quite good at self-medicating. Pause for thought, the medication was taking over at this point. There was drinking during work time. At work, there was always a beer culture, probably up until possibly 8 or 9 years ago, I suppose, where we used to have effort days. This morning's been an effort, guys, let's go for a beer. Plus, we've done a great work today, let's have an effort day down the pub. It was intrinsic there. We'd have sundowners. What's a sundowner? What's the essence of a sundowner? Then, as the global financial crisis kicked in and companies realised that maybe you're there to, and again, I use the double word now, you're there to work, not to socialise with experiences, it starts changing things. So drinking in the workplace becomes a bit unheard of. It was that point that I really decided that I had to do something. With my son, we'd actually, one thing I admitted to say, I rushed through things, was another very important thing about facing up to facts with mental health and bits and pieces is seeking a very good GP, seeking medical guys who understand it. Yes, the answer initially is to start some pills. A lot of people, cynics, say that, oh yeah, doctors will only give you a pill and out the door. That's if you're going to, if the doctor doesn't understand mental health, really get it, these are a stopgap. So I had to decide that I had to get off the hamster wheel. Saw my GP. Every time I saw my GP, it was a case of, dare I say, it's a matter of when, not if. So taking my son's guidance on board, same as him, started taking antidepressants, Prozac. It helped immensely. It took me time to actually step back and try and keep things on the level keel. Out of the mouth of babes. I told you a story about this, and no, I'm not going to tell the story. Really, this one here. So I think you've already seen how much admiration I've got there, and again, role model both ways. At the time, I stood up and said, I really have a lot of stuff going on here. I've got to do this, talking to my son. And his first words to me were, don't worry, Dad, we'll get through this. If that's not a big tick in the box to say that hopefully you've done the right thing as a parent and a role model, what is it? So I just have to put that one in there because that just actually blew me away. Those words were a massive inspiration. Escape fantasies, running away. So this is where it happened. So remember, I haven't mentioned alcohol for quite a while. This is still going on in the background because, hey, guess what? I didn't think the alcohol was the problem. I thought I was depressed. When I was at work, most of the time I was planning trips abroad with my son to the cross, bits and pieces. Then you're coming back after all the time away, feeling pretty down and unhappy. So I then brokered a deal with the company that I would take a year off unpaid. Career break, sabbatical, call it whatever it is. Back in those days, again, mental health was never really understood by companies. So realistically, it should have been a mental health break. I should have possibly gone medical. But from my point of view, I was too stoic, too out there to not going to happen. So I took a year off and done some traveling. I was running away. The reality of life was obviously 13 trips we were away for 261 days in a year. 115,000, 62 cities, countries and regions. We went everywhere. But what I used this was, the first place we went to was over here in Brisbane. I left the corporate world under a bit of a cloud because of the drinking. I then decided that, okay, just get away from everything, let's just go somewhere else. Ended up in the middle of a 128-acre farm in Brisbane. Just me and a dog, just after it and a few cows. I would walk, I would take time, and part of my recovery and my resilience building technique is to take in the moment. This is very important. This is now that I'm seeing is so important that people need to just step aside and just walk, take in around them. Fell in love with wildlife photography. It's a couple of my snaps. Okay, it's not wildlife, but it's pictures and bits and pieces. But then after all this lovely time, there's a reality that I'm not the richest man in the world. I have to go back to Seb W words. So I then start talking to my company to say, okay, I've had my year off. I'd like to come back. So the rules of a career break in those days was if your job or your role was still available, you could go straight back into that. If there's not a comparable alternative would be found for you, I think was the exact words. So I gave notice to the company that I was coming back. Then, I've got this the wrong way around, that's good. So I'm going to rewind back to the comorbidity side of things. That's the only one word I've got in here, which is medical. It was evident that I was suffering with this continual thing. So which came first, the chicken or the egg? Which came first, the depression or the drinking? It's now becoming very evident that these two coincide with each other in this comorbidity. So you drink because you're depressed because you drink because you're depressed, and it's just a continuous circle. So I'd addressed the depression side of things. The alcohol was still there and the drinking was still there, which was then prompting the depression. Then there we go, rock bottom. You'll know it when you hear it. So rock bottom for me came in several forms. As I said, I'd done this running away. I'd had a year away. I was ready to go back to the work situation. Said to my boss, right, I'm ready to come back. He said, yeah, okay, cool. Check out the situation's going, blah, 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 blah. A few conversations happened. Then a confirmation came from my manager that they were prepared to have me back at work, but there's a but. The but was, the words they used were, we're actively investigating your behaviours prior to you leaving. So realistically, on hindsight, so if I could tell hindsight to you guys, I'd love to sell it to you guys, really good. But on hindsight, what they were really saying was, yep, you've had some problems, you've had some issues. They never acknowledged that they existed. They never acknowledged that the alcohol was part of my mental illness. I had a mental breakdown as well prior to leaving. I'd addressed everything, but then they just wanted to just stick behind to me. So they started a full-blown investigation. I think it was more like, can we have 101 good reasons why we shouldn't reemploy Andy? Tell me 10 bad things about Andy. The accusations they came at me with were realistically, you put that alongside, and I've not put it as a graphic, but you put it alongside the definition of someone who's suffering with a mental health illness, irritability, lack of sleep, inconsistency, partial aggressiveness. These aren't nice things to admit to or to read about yourself, but they really threw at me. So in the first instance, on the first HR meeting, they said, how do you feel? I said, do you know the honest truth? I just want to come up under the table and cry. It hurts so much. So then it was evident that the alcohol had taken a bigger toll on things than I expected. I thought delusionally I'd go away with it. So I then said to myself, right, I need to sort this out. Something's got to change. What is that something? Me, I have to give up drinking. I need to change the perspective of my life, so I'm not looking just down. I don't know how good the slides are on Zoom, so I hope they're working. This is obviously looking down through the empty glass, so the glass lens, kick the beer into touch. So I decided to look into avenues of how to give up alcohol. Okay, everybody knows the two-letter word, which is their Alcoholics Anonymous. I decided to go to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. I put this in my mind, and this was prior to just as the company was still investigating me, the family situation was getting potentially bad. What I'll say for everything is, luckily enough, my wife and my children have been my rock. They've been there for me forever. The wife was very good, but there was always talk about the drinking, but they learned to tolerate the drinking and bits and pieces. So I decided I was going to go to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and another final kick of the proverbial was, I said to the wife, I'm going out, and her exact words were, oh, you're off to the pub to get pissed again, aren't you? I said, well, actually, no, I'm going to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. So I drove to said Alcoholics Anonymous meeting in floods of tears, because the final realisation of what or how I meant to the wife was there. So I attended an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and I'm not going to get into specifics of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a system that's been there and it works for certain type of people. I have a very analytical brain. So I used Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, the first one I went to look around me and say, I didn't feel pity, I didn't feel thing, but I just saw people who had lost a lot. And that could be me in a few years' time if I didn't change it. So then I embarked on alternative ways of doing things, retrain the brain. I can say it now, but I never hang up with it. Cognitive behaviour therapy. Just have to tell yourself, have a beer, no, have a hangover. Have one beer, you'll be all right. Then it'll be 10, 12 bits and pieces. Just had to retrain the brain and tell the brain that alcohol is a poison. Understand what it was doing to myself. A lot of the problems we get nowadays is with the information out. There's too much information out there. So I didn't seek too much information on Dr. Google. Dr. Google can tell you anything and everything. But this was just my way of rationalising that. Then there was a bit of a breaking point. Starting 25th July 2019, I gave up drinking. Just like that. That is actually the current numbers that I put in for today. So I have actually not been drinking an alcoholic drink for 91,809,837 seconds. It's great. Yeah, just had to do cold turkey. And like I said, I just got to the point where I said, you know, just can't be doing this anymore. So bulk two things is I've given up the drinking. The investigation of work was going on. This was a good move towards them to tell the chairman that they had changed. What happened at the end there was they came back to me and said, every claim's been substantiated. They weren't prepared to put me back into my previous role. But what they did do was they put me into a service desk role, just answering the telephone, allegedly for less stress and responsibility to me. I think that's it. They just don't get it. They just don't get it. You've got a guy who's excelled for 10 years and 1 year he has an off year and he goes bad. So I carried on working on the service desk, and then what happened is, as time's gone by, started recognising other people who were in the same situation I was in the workplace. So I then almost become what I call myself a wellness warden. Bit of a catchy name. But people had seen my journey because I'd left under a cloud. I'd returned back to work. It was all very hush and secretive what I'd gone on. And people really were just seeing the worst side. So I had to make a point of saying, I have changed, but I'm not embarrassed to say what was happening to change. I was in a bad position. People were then coming back to me. So then it started talking about coping strategies, resilience, and bits and pieces like that. Didn't fit too well with the corporate world. The management didn't like me talking. Guess what, get over it. I'm a very keen advocate to say on the talking side of things, go to work, someone's feeling a bit funky, you check if they're okay. The saying is, are you okay, of course, but it's the conversation after that what goes on. So then I'd happily sort of say, come on, let's go and grab a coffee, let's have a donut, let's just get out in the environment and chat. Then also with my other recovery strategies, the same idea, said about a GP. A classic example was one young guy was really struggling, and I could see him struggling, he was flustered and getting work. So start chipping away to get to the conversations, having a coffee and donut, bits and pieces. Then it transpires that he'd been seeing GPs. So, okay, cool, so what's happened there? But he was going to the bulk billing places, so he had no consistency. Every time he went to see a different GP, he'd see a different view. So there was no story being built. And they were just trying different medications to see what's what. When you're talking medication and mental health, obviously, as you can imagine, there's so many variants going into the brain. It's just a mixed match on how you work out what's what. So the first report, as I always say to everybody, seek the correct professional advice. He got onto a GP and then consistently got into the right stage. So what happened there was I then made another brave step, I suppose, and decided to shake the hands of the management of the company, putting everything that had been behind me. That's another sub-issue. But at the current time, it didn't fit my ethics and my understanding of mental health. And I decided to go away and retrain myself and show the world how to deal with mental health. I vowed that day when I should have said manager, and he really didn't understand why I was walking away, to say I never want someone to be in the same situation as I was and not know where to turn, not know where to support or anything like this. So this one here is a beautiful one. Day you'll tell your story of how you overcome what you went through, and it will be someone else's survival guide. That, I'm not one for motivational words and posters saying, you've got this, man. Yeah, rah, rah, team. But this one sat on my training manual when I was doing my Cert 4. Every time I went to do some training and understanding of what mental health was, it was there. So I think that's beautiful. So resilience is picking yourself up again. So this is where I was with my resilience, picking yourself up. Two lovely pieces of paper, which realistically, yes, they're great. This one's more importantly because this is actually a great course now that we're now starting to mental health first aid. Probably heard of that one. Being introduced at a high level into companies that it's actually getting people to understand the signs. They use a process called ALGE, which is realistically like your doctor's ABC. When it comes to mental health, I can't cure everybody's problems. I'm not a clinician, I'm not a psychologist. But again, if you actually get to the point that you see the signs and then you refer somebody to the correct supports. So that, my lovely Cert 4 in the corner there, that's realistically to get any credibility or existence in the current mental health situation. This is changing with the advent of lived experience of these. I went along and started working as a support worker within a NDI service provider. And it then transpired that there was a lot more to this mental health support than just support workers and also the company. So I started working with a recovery coach, more becoming a lived experience peer mentor. And then it comes into some of the community groups, which are fundamentally important as well. So mental health support and resilience is clinical, the psychological, but this is the big one. I was talking to Ken earlier on here about the importance of men, and I'm sorry it's all men, obviously I'm a man, but men are worse. Men still just have this whole thing about not even having touch of their feelings. So what I actually do and what I'm involved in, it's funny how when you do your slides, you see the mistakes now, but that's another story. The manual, it's just guys getting together and just walking. We don't talk about anything other than cars, life, universe, and everything else that's around. And also Mr. Perfect Barbecue. Great idea for people to come along and just have a great support. So as I said now, I'm a mental health peer support mentor. This one here again, because I like visualizations and reminders, this is from one of my clients, which I've been working very hard with him. He's gone from a situation where he's sat in a room, smoking and drinking all the time, to actually getting him out and about on a regular basis, and he's now socially interacting with people, and he's getting his life work. We're now looking to get him a job. Now leading on towards the tail end where I'm really going to start hitting you guys hard with what the answer is, how it is. I think earlier on someone said you make it sound so simple. It's not simple. We just need to be human beings. Empathy, understanding. Empathy requires us to suspend our egos and live in another's world. This is my closing thing. Mental illness is nothing to be ashamed of. Neither is talking about it. Again, it comes back to why hopefully you'll go away and remember that I stood here as a crocodile telling you about mental health. Men need to be able to do this. I would love to do this presentation with nothing on, to show that there is nothing to worry about. I'd probably get arrested. So, the other one I'm very keen on, as I said, is the stigma. Get rid of the stigma. Don't judge people. There's a lot of terminology change going on now, which is very difficult if it's ingrained. So it's not mental, it's living with a mental impairment, it's living with this and all those things. Get rid of the stigma. You don't have to. I would like to think, other than being bouncy or mucky, that I carry on a normal life. I still suffer from depression. I'm still in depression. But guess what? With the right support mechanisms and coping mechanisms, we can do it. So there is no reason to stop the stigma, stop judging, and please let's talk. Let's be human beings again. Just be human beings. Let's talk. And that's me. noticed I had a lot more to say, but I had to condense it a bit. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Before you sit down, just wanted to say, I'm just going to stop sharing so that those on Zoom can see us.
Hopefully it zoomed okay as well. Apologies.
Yeah, apologies for the sound at the start there. I hope that improved when we moved the camera forward. Does anybody have any questions for Andy? And I'm including on Zoom, if you have a question for Andy, please just pop it in the chat.
Yeah, well, I don't buy it.
Okay, if you want to come around this way,
Yeah,
so you're on there.
I have a question for you, Andy.
Go for it.
So, starting that conversation with a man or a male in your life, what sort of questions do you actually ask? Because I know we have Are You Okay Day,
Yeah.
but like, what's the follow-up?
So with the Are You Okay Day, I think it's a great concept, but they're now turning it around to being not so much asking the pointed questions, but turning it around. You had the dancing black dog, which says it's okay to be not okay. So that will prompt people to sort of see the emblem. From my point of view, I think, I'm not saying get an aura, but it's just an understanding. You don't necessarily have to ask the question out, like, are you okay? You might, this young guy was saying he kept arriving late at work and was flustered and sort of, you miss a break? Do you travel to work? Just have a conversation, be a human being, and then you can start just extracting the information. Again, I think because I can and I do talk a lot, I tend to extract that conversations, but opening up to people. With my clients, the social psycho stuff is as well, just getting them used to going out and saying hello to people. I'm one of these, I'm a hello person. I'm not Mr. Bouncy happy all the time, like I said, yeah. But it's a case of walking around, oh, hi, how you doing? Again, just human beings. Just get there. And you don't have to ask the question because you can get to the question just by listening and also confident. Yeah.
Can I ask, with your one-on-one experience?
Yeah.
When you said that you actually support people one-on-one,
Yes.
can you elaborate a bit more on what that looks like?
Yeah, so what I do now is I'm actually, lucky enough, I work directly as an NDIS provider, as a lived experience behaviour mentor. I've just taken it up one notch, slightly different. So I actually sit down with the client to work out what their life goals are, try and get an understanding of what they want with a recovery coach. I then implement those things. But a lot of the stuff I do is, say like the psychosocial, is just getting people out and about and getting used to talking to people. A lot of the illnesses mental impairments that I deal with the guys, be it schizophrenia, paranoia, lack of social interaction is the worst thing. 4 walls just there. So it's just getting out. I go walking with the guys a lot. One of the guys got a dog, so we go out. But it's also then you introduce the talking, the interactions, but then you start doing some saying earlier on. Men, you say the word mindfulness to men, they think you're going to be the peace yoga. But mindfulness is, I introduce that into just by going out and just saying, hey, look, there's a kookaburra. Oh, look, there's this, and taking a step back and looking. So nature's very important. And then the other thing that I've done as well was when the guys are saying that card, I actually started a program where I was working one-on-one with them in a work environment, getting them exposure to work, and then take the next step to get them employment. So it depends on the circumstances, on what they need and how they need it. Another guy I'm working with, we're actually trying to launch him as a professional artist. So the art is his thing. So it's just how you then build a profile. So it's incorporating my life experience with mental health, my life experience as a businessman, and also mini project manager. So you just offer all the services to help you, as opposed to just taking it to the shop, sitting in the corner and having a coffee and sitting on the phone. It doesn't work.
Andy, thanks for your talk. Andy, I guess, how much do you talk about in your journey? In my journey, I guess being good enough, being acceptable to other people.
Yeah.
It's not very sexy, but really, I guess I guess it's the core of human drives and our desire for that. In my understanding.
Yeah.
Is that sort of stuff that you talk about, or what was it with you that really hurt you when you were struggling?
Again, the lack of, I won't even say acknowledgement, because I didn't acknowledge myself for a long time. So to hurt the side of things and realising at times it's one of those, you don't know if you're in a situation till you're in a situation. But yeah, the lack of understanding with the drinking and stuff like that, I'm now seeing again, it used to be that Andy was just a total gesture drunk and that was him and all those sorts of things. Towards the end, people started avoiding me because of the drinking and bits and pieces. I take a bit of a hole. That was very restrained, wasn't it? But then the turning point, I think, where you're alluding to there is where you actually just turn around and say, and I said to you about studio, the crocodile studio with nothing on. Who are you to judge? You've got your own stuff going on, I'll help you with that, but I'm happy with who I am, where I've been and where I'm going. And if you don't like that, you can kiss my butt. And that's the other approach as well. So by being honest and open to you guys, I'm honest and open with my clients, that just installs the belief. And a lot of these things is about belief as well. Just believe you can do it. Just instill positive belief in it. Okay, be a human being. What was it, 3 years ago, I was sitting down looking around you, sitting in the Mulder Beach Hotel in front of me, losing my job, my career, my wife, my children, my everything. But then, now look at me now, I now have 5 clients who I just in total awe of what I'm doing with them. I'm now working intrinsically with government-based things to try and get the understanding. Lived experience and peer mentoring is very, very critical. And that's, I personally think that's the revolution that we're going to see in the mental health arena nowadays. With the NDIS and bits and pieces, that's great. It's a system that pays certain things, but there's also a lot of people. Remember, I said to you, I never wanted to be the person who knows where not to turn. NDIS has got a lot of clients, but there's also a lot of people like me who are just there who are struggling with what used to be called stress, but it's now prevalent that it's a lot more than stress. So that's where the community-based support, getting out there, getting out and about, interacting, and yeah, get stories with stories, the barbecues. I start my barbecue tour. It's not a talk. I'm not there. I'm not a facilitator. I'm a facilitator. I cook the sausages, but I'm not there to have an agenda or anything like that. So I said, look, this isn't Depressants Anonymous. Don't stand there and say, hi, I'm Andy. I suffer with clinical depression. The guys will just stand around and talk. It's sunny. We'll talk about sun, bike, university, have some sausages, cook a barbecue, which is a male thing. And then what I'm finding is that that seed is being planted with some guys, and one of the guys is coming back and he's then helping other guys with his techniques of how he's done it. He's done that. And we just keep doing this. We just build up this lovely big picture. Again, that's just me. Sorry.
No,
I apologise so much, but I just can't say enough about passion and just human beings, guys.
We've got another question from Lynn. Hi, Lynn, by the way. Nice to see you virtually. Lynn Bisley is actually a ConnectGroups patron as well. She's asked, Andy, how do you help make that got to really tackle this moment happen?
Yeah. Okay. That's the fine line between, remember I did the lovely graphic up with rock bottom. I hit rock bottom, and that was a realisation. What we need to do is get pre-crisis, pre-rock bottom, and again with the talking, understanding, acceptance of everything and actually facing up to it. Hopefully we don't see too many people having the rock bottom. By telling my story, hopefully I'll inspire people to know that you can pull the pin before you hit rock bottom. That's just by facing up to things. I know it's easy for me to say it now, I've done it, but again, with positive reinforcement, support and understanding, people will get there before they hit rock bottom. Hope that helps.
Any other questions for Andy?
Andy, men of my generation, and I'm a bit older than you at 21, sort of have difficulty, I suppose, recognising that mental health is really no different than our physical health. It's a problem that we have to address. How would you say we should talk to men about that?
Same idea, exactly that. So we've gone thousands of years where physical health has been evident. You've got a broken arm, you can see that. I know what you're saying, it's breaking. And again, that's just fighting that stigma historically. And it's The British stiff upper lip. We don't talk about emotions. We do this, we do this, we do that. It's the same as if you had a broken leg, you'd be limping. So it's just again giving the opportunities for those approaches to be seeing how it is. And I was saying earlier on as well that I think with the social media side of things, it's great we have an exposure and the understanding that this is happening, but it's maybe gone a bit too far. So I've used the 22-year-olds plus, as you said. Very hesitant to take that on because again, that's telling you. Whereas I just want to be able to plant the seed to get the understanding. Like I said, just come on, have a sausage and just chat about things. Even just getting out of the house helps immensely. A lot of these mental health things, and especially the 22-year-old generation, is that they've probably finished work, they're retired, the wife runs off with the grandkids or something like that. She had a couple of morning bits reason, and the old man pops around in his shed, but that doesn't do anything. So it's a social isolation. COVID has also done that as well, obviously. Like you're saying earlier on, it also helped that we've got a lovely great new platform called Zoom, where people are interacting a lot more, and that can be used. And telemedicine, there's also another push part of the ECHO thing is to start doing telemedicine via Zoom with bits and pieces. So we can start introducing that to remote communities, those who may not want to actually, oh, that says Mr. Perfect, mental health's best friend or something, you know, seeing the back, you know, there's looms over there. It's not that, whereas it can be done in an isolated situation. And again, it's just chip away, and yeah, it's simple as that. Just even if it is just checking in on a friend and just saying let's go for coffee, and then it's almost like a blank piece of paper, and there it is. I think we're getting there. A long way to go, but like I said, it's just chipping away. But then getting some more 22-year-old plus advocates on board as well. Because again, I think as you rightly said there, I'm lucky I'm of the 21-year-old information generation, so I get it and I can see it. Whereas the 22-year-olds are that further down the line where it's just like I say, it's all denial. And I won't say lack of understanding. So the next step is to then get how we communicate this information in concise, understandable. So you talk about, yes, you've got a certain field where you've got guys who need to understand it, but let's set up a community-based hub where we can just say, okay, here's this, and just communicate on the spot. There's so many community-based organisations out there doing things, but nobody knows that they're there, unless you know they're there, if that makes sense. So why don't we get to a point where we can just sort of say, okay, not information overload. I don't want to have information overload. Okay, talking to the doctors instead of saying, okay, here's this. Oh, you feel good. Have you considered going to one of these? I use the bar because it's what I'm involved in. So sorry, it's not selling it. But have you gone to a man shed, a man walk? You've got the Heart Foundation walks as well, which are quite big, which a lot of people don't know about. These are just things that people get. There's a group called Meetup as well. They just do organisations as well. And it's just, again, getting people to, I think it's not it's a mutual agreement, if that's a good way of explaining it. So instead of actually, like I said, going there and going, it's just a case of, yeah, okay, we're just here, we just all need the same numbers. I think I've labelled that one, but yeah, I think that's how you do it. Just chip away, just chip. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Can we all just give Andy a